Hello and welcome to Business on the Wire. An industry that's been struggling for several quarters now seems to have found an unlikely outlier. While the automobile industry itself has lived through one of its worst quarters in terms of sales, Mercedes-Benz India delivered record cars during the festive period of Navratri and Dussehra. It actually sold 550 cars to customers. So, is the luxury car market booming even as two wheeler makers and truck makers struggle to find sales and the pitch that they had some quarters back? Joining me to talk about that and the strong run for Mercedes Benz is Martin Schwenk. He's Managing Director and CEO at Mercedes-Benz India Pvt Ltd. Thank you very much, Martin, for joining in and having this conversation with me. It's been a good festive period for Mercedes-Benz. First of all, were you surprised with the numbers in terms of sales that you saw through the Dussehra period? And secondly, how does it compare to how things were in 2019?
Yeah, I have to say, maybe not exactly surprised, but the numbers exceeded our expectation, I should say. Yeah, when we had in the 10 days period around 550 deliveries between Navratri and Dussehra, that was a little bit more than what we had expected. On the other hand, what I can also say, we saw over the last couple of months a positive momentum. So every month we could sell like 25% or even more than the previous months, and that really gave us a good feeling that we running into a stronger festive season. And right now I don't have obviously October numbers yet, but when I talk to our dealers and to my colleagues in sales, we feel a lot of positivity as well. People have, how can I say, they're back on the roads, not only with cars, but the entire say emotion seems to be more positive again, and that helps obviously then also when it comes to our product. So I think that is quite good. On the other hand, we are not able to get to levels what we had last year. I think overall. So at present, our pace is around maybe 80% of what we had last year. So let's see now how October, November, and so on plays out. So whilst I'm very positive, and I think we back to some level of normalcy. It's not like a very, very strong year. I mean, last year, by the way, we had the best quarter four in ever. Yeah, so that won't happen this year. But if we get anywhere in that area, that shall be quite a success already.
I know you said you don't have October figures yet, but given the patch you're getting into, which is Dhanteras, where people make a lot of purchases, and then Diwali, which is really the biggest festival in India, what kind of rough targets even have you penciled in? What would you be surprised not to cross in terms of sales?
Well, we never give monthly data, and I don't do that now as well. Even more so, we don't do that in advance. Yeah, but I think, as I said, we should be again quite a bit higher. And if I'm looking again at say maybe 20-25% more than in September, that would be very good. Yeah, and then we would have in a good range. But let's see. So month over month since July, really we recovered, and you know, at the end, a couple of cars more or less is good, but it's about the entire momentum, and can you really then maintain that level? That will be, I think, the challenge then.
Yeah, I was looking at the sales that happened for you through the September period, Martin, where 550 cars got sold, and it looks like some of the key markets remain the same. But I'd love to hear more from you on what's really picking up. Is it Delhi, Mumbai, Gujarat, or are you seeing sales momentum outside of those spaces as well?
I would really say the north is picking up. That was the strongest area in north, and that's the entire northern region, specifically also then obviously Delhi. I think there is a lot of celebratory mood and energy, but also you talk about Gujarat, Mumbai. I think very welcoming as well, and I think all the regions are contributing now. But if you ask me about a region sticking out, it's certainly the north. Which has done better than what we had hoped, and so now the other regions are also coming quite sustainably, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yours is one of the few companies, and not even in the auto industry, I mean, pan industry, Martin, that has been able to register this month on month V-shaped recovery, as you said, in terms of sales, thanks to the festive period. But it's not like, numbers were flagging for you. I think from Jan to September 2020, you've done over 5,000. As you mentioned, 2019 was pretty good. Has Mercedes generally been bucking the auto industry trend over the last couple of quarters?
If you talk about India, I think, or in a global pattern, that's very different. Yeah. So the global view, the colleagues did also very, very good, and I think much better than the competition here in India. I think overall, I cannot say we have not been part of the trend. We lost also a lot of sales, obviously, when dealerships were closed in March, April, May, and then the slow startup then May, June, where we had a lot of disturbances still with additional lockdowns or partial lockdowns. So that took quite some time. So I think it would be a little bit too strong to say that we could completely separate us from the market. I mean, the overall market was under stress, and we also participated in that, quite frankly. On the other hand, I think what helped us a lot is we launched a lot of new products. We had a lot of offerings also from the financing part. So I think that created a lot of positivity. We have very take a GLE or GLS, very prominent cars and very strong in our portfolio, and that obviously helps then to move on and come back. And I'm confident we have had a very strong recovery, probably stronger than most in the industry on our numbers, obviously.
Are you on track to introduce the A-Class limousine that was planned for the October to December period? Has that happened already?
No, it has not happened already, and we're still struggling with getting everything aligned. Yeah, what we do next now, we bring first a different car on November 3rd. We bring the AMG GLC 43 Coupe, which is a very sporty car, and on the A limousine, we are still looking. That is part of the conditions in the COVID lockdown. We had a lot of disruptions, and that's only partially supply chain. On the other hand, it is more also with support we needed to set up new productions. And with travel restriction, we have had and still suffer some delays there, which is obviously a concern. And we're trying to deal with that, so I cannot make a final statement on that. We're still working on the different topics, but I think we could quite clearly still bring a lot of positive energy. I mean, we launched not too long ago, for example, the EQC, our first electric vehicle, and that also was delayed a couple of months for obvious reasons. Yeah, but then beginning of October, eventually we could. Yeah, so it's we have to deal and schedule now. And make it somehow happen. So is in these times not always 100% predictable. If you book a flight for in a week's time, you're not 100% sure that it will happen. Yeah, so these type of things are obviously part of the business at the moment.
Yeah. Martin, some of your peers have seen recovery as well, particularly in the passenger vehicle segment. But I think what's got people to really sit up and take notice about Mercedes is the fact that there is a certain prohibitive price level involved in these sales. Do you think that you've kind of hit a sweet spot, much like the art market, where COVID has been a blessing in disguise, where there are people with a certain disposable income, which is now not being routed towards international travel or any other expenses, and in turn is actually being put into making a luxury purchase like a Mercedes-Benz or an expensive piece of art?
There's always several elements to that question. I would say overall, when we suffered during the when in mid-year, like everyone else, we have a lot of our customers. Most of them actually, they are business owners of the one or other fashion. So their main concern is at that point in time, surely not, do I need a new car? Since they don't need a new car, they want maybe one, but they don't need it because they probably have already one, or two or so. So what will happen is they will obviously have to focus on their families, on their business, on their employees. And that introduced, I think, quite a little bit of pent-up demand, and also then deferral of purchase. So what we see now is with things getting more normal, people also can making plans now again for their businesses, for their lives. Then we see them coming back, and then we see obviously also that people who have the money, they want to spend on them. I mean, that goes from weddings or to cars. I mean, somehow things are coming back, and I think a new car then, specifically from our brand, is always a big milestone for many, and they really celebrate and enjoy that. I know that from the many customer contacts I have and from deliveries of vehicles. So certainly that helps also. I mean, you may know or not, we called our marketing campaign, which we start in September, we called it Unlock. So there's a lot of pictures and videos and so on unlocking, and I think that is basically what everyone feels. Yeah, let's unlock ourselves, and let's to as much as possible start enjoying life again, and also spending on us. And for sure, there is more disposable income in the one or other area, but on the other hand, also the burden is higher in many instances. As I said, a lot of our customers are business owners, and they are in their businesses not at normal levels. Most of them are not. So it's still prudent to assume that they have to balance between their desires and their necessities at this time.
As we must all. Not that all of us have the choice of whether or not to buy a Mercedes, but at a different level, I imagine. I know you said that the terrain is quite uncertain, Martin, but would you be more sanguine about the outlook or the runway in terms of pricing? Do you think you can continue to enjoy the very low price elasticity and perhaps even get some elbow room to increase prices over the next couple of quarters, if not months?
I mean, we already had to increase prices a couple of weeks ago because of, I mean, the entire exchange rate development didn't help us, and at the end, we still are here to make business and not giving away the cars, even though. So we had to do some because of the input cost increase prices moderately. That can always happen in future, but it is actually not so much in improving our margins. It's trying to catch up with pricing development. So we'll have also to see how costs are developing, and that is input cost, that is domestic inflation cost, and so forth, which is usually more what we react on when we do a general change. It's usually inflation driven or exchange rate driven. On the other hand, whenever we bring a new car, we obviously look into what are the features this car offers, and how can we place it then within our own lineup and compare to the competition. And frankly, we are able in many instances to claim a premium on our vehicles compared to competitors.
It's a fairly diverse industry, even within the passenger vehicle segment, Martin. I mean, there's really something for everyone in this space. So, but would you say, given how tough the last couple of quarters are, you're feeling more optimistic about the road going ahead? Because that's the point being made at this point, that perhaps the PV industry specifically is at the cusp of a replacement cycle. The average age of vehicles has, hit a multi-decade high. There's an interest rate situation. Used car prices have improved. Generally, do you feel that the landscape for passenger vehicles seems to have improved?
I mean, in the general passenger car market, you can certainly see that the people are more interested also in personal transportation again. Yeah, because of obvious reasons, sharing vehicles has maybe a little less of a preference for many people, and I would think that's something which goes through the entire market. So you will certainly find that in the entry segment, but also in our segment, we have customers who prefer maybe to take a long distance drive for 300, 400, 500 kilometers. In the past, they would not have considered possible or necessary. They would have flown. And so certainly we see, for example, in that segment, also a couple of customers who would prefer now having a comfortable E-Class or an S-Class or or even an SUV, which gives them a little bit of comfort when driving. In the past, they might have had not that need or that wish because they were preferring air travel. So we see some of this, but I would personally think the entire COVID situation is more of a short-term or a temporary. It's not only short, it takes already a couple of months and it will take some more months, but it's a temporary burden or setback, not only to the overall economy or the individuals, but also to the car industry. And I would think we will be able to come out of that. I don't think it will trigger a structural change necessarily. I would think things go to some level in what we had had before, but I would also think it takes quite a few more months till we get there where we had been before. So if you ask me, I don't think next year will completely be a normal year again. I still think it will take time, and most of the fiscal year 21, 22, it will keep us busy in recovering to a situation pre-COVID. So that would be my assessment on the current situation.
Is it your sense, though, Martin, that once we do emerge from this COVID crisis, we may have a far more bifurcated auto industry? For example, even at this point, what's happening with the passenger vehicles is not what's happening with the two-wheeler market. Even over there are players like Bajaj Auto that are reporting extremely sharp dips as high as 30%. The truck makers have not done well for many quarters now. The only sort of, bright spot was what was happening in the agri space. Do you think moves will become more disparate, conversely to what they were earlier, where everyone saw a sales dip and then everyone saw a small recovery?
It's very hard to tell because there are so many different influences. I mean, the truck business has had very different impacts already before because of load changes, and then we had the impact of the BS4, BS6 transition, which also was managed by every manufacturer across the entire portfolio, from two-wheelers to trucks and cars very differently. So I think there's also a lot of interactions or setup that the companies themselves do that can influence what's happening, how they develop their product portfolio, how they manage their inventories, and that will also dominate then the messaging. I'm not completely clear, quite frankly, to say that there would be a bifurcation also. I cannot say that. I don't have that visibility. In my view, I think a lot of things will settle down and get back to what beforehand was already. But I'm really not a specialist on trucks. I have a colleague who is responsible for Daimler India commercial vehicles. He will be much more capable in giving you a feeling on what the truck business is doing. So I would think we see generally a recovery, but I think it will take time. We have seen GDP numbers. The projections are anywhere in the negative territory, up to minus 10% for this fiscal year, and then coming back. So I think if we look into this curve, it will take time for all segments of the market eventually.
You do have the advantage of seeing this from, a larger vantage point, though, Martin. You're looking at India, but you also have a sense of what's happening in the China market, globally in Europe as well. Where does India fit in that sense? Are you feeling optimistic or cautious about how the Indian economy is working towards its recovery, if any, or are you feeling quite worried?
If you look into the global picture, it is very different wherever you look at. I mean, obviously, the strongest recovery has been in Southeast Asia, in China, where you see that. Whilst you see US also did quite well, Europe was on good track. Now it's falling at the moment down again, and the impact on the business is very hard to predict at the moment. I mean, even if you follow the stock market movements, these guys who do a lot of analysis don't know much more than we know at the end. So I think if we look into the overall picture, every country has more or less their own pace, and I'm confident that India is on track. When we look into how the pandemic situation is playing out, we can see that overall the trend is positive, and I would hope that lasts through the festive season and as well, and then we will be able to further harvest on that stability. When I was having interviews, say in May, for example, I said, let's hope that we get a opening up step by step and get stability. And if I look back, I can clearly say the different phases of unlock did create stability, and we didn't have too many disruptions again by lockdowns. We had restrictions, but they were step by step released. And I think that is a very good way to do business, instead of opening quickly or slowly, closing again, doing in one state something else and the other, or in that street or in that city. So I think we have gained now a stability now in the movement overall, that helps us to build the business back. And in that sense, I think we are well positioned in India. On the other hand, the problems are far from over. And if you look into the different financial KPIs, you see positive sprouts, but it's still a long way to go. So anything more you would have to ask more specialists, but I'm feeling confident that in midterm we are on the right track. Sorry.
You're also looking at expanding your presence in India. Are you on track to commence local manufacturing as was planned?
Yes. I mean, besides a few delays, which I already pointed out, we are on track with our portfolio, our product portfolio, also the expansions we have planned. As I said, we start now also producing locally our performance cars, the AMGs, in this case, GLC coupe. So that was part of our strategic plan to bring also performance cars into local production. So I would think, yes, we are on track. We are a little bit delayed, and also our numbers, our volumes are lower than what we had hoped for generally, because obviously nobody could foresee this type of crisis, but we have not changed our overall strategy. We remain positive that we will be further in the mid and long term, we will have the growth potential here in India, but obviously we'll have to navigate now through a little bit more difficult time, which didn't change our strategy at all.
One of your peers was quite vocal in their criticism of the situation or the landscape in India, though, Martin, which is Toyota Kirloskar, where they said that they're not keen on expanding anymore because they felt that they didn't get enough support as an industry. The taxation regime was completely out of whack. In fact, they also went on to make the statement saying, do you think car makers are selling drugs or liquor at the rate that they are taxed? Any concerns on that front?
I mean, naturally, we can say that the tax regime in India is not so conducive to vehicle manufacture and sale of vehicles, specifically when you come to premium and luxury cars, or say cars larger than 4 meters in length. Yeah, because then you look at substantial taxes. I mean, any of our car will attract between 48 and 50% on GST and cess, and then up to 20% on road taxes, which is substantial. And if the car is being imported, we pay very high import duties. If we import the parts to build the car, still the import duty is significant, around 15+%. So that obviously adds, and it creates a retail price or an on-road price for our vehicles, which is relatively comparatively higher than in most of the other markets, and that for sure slows the expansion of a market. So I would clearly think it would make sense and help the development of the industry, as specifically also small volume players as we are, if we had a broader audience, and that would also be created by having it a more accessible. And there's only so much the manufacturer can do a lot, because of, I mentioned the tax rates here. That is definitely quite a bit of money the consumer needs to cash out. So I would wish that we could have, for example, luxury car market is around 1.2% of the overall car industry. That is tenfold or more less than in most of the other countries. And that's probably in all likeliness because of the additional pricing components, which are not in so much on our side, but they are part of the taxation scheme. So on the other hand, I would always want to say we have to act in the framework we are. And when we see an opportunity, like for example in the electric space where we have launched the EQC, as I already mentioned, there we don't have these high GST rates. We have 5% of GST. Many states have reduced or even zero on road tax. So that makes these cars also then more, how can I say, more viable to some customers, other than we wouldn't be able to bring that in. Overall, the intent would always be to have a certain amount of volume, and because the volume will then create the leverage that you can actually produce locally, that you can have deeper localization, and that's what we're looking for. But there we are limited in our growth at the moment.
Are you hopeful, though, of any rationalization on the taxation front, Martin? Because even the industry seems to have an on-again, off-again approach with the government, where a couple of months back, Maruti said, look, we really need to relook these taxes, but more recently said, hey, passenger vehicle sales are picking up. The government is short on revenue. If we go and ask them to rationalize taxes now, it doesn't make any sense. Are you at all hopeful that this GST issue will get resolved in any way in favor of the auto industry, or do you think this one's a leave it alone?
I personally think it is a long shot. I mean, as much as strategically, I think it would make sense. I see their operational hurdles, and also, I mean, if you just follow the entire GST discussion between central and states and so forth, I think we would not stand in the front here of being a problem that needs to be resolved. So if you ask me like this, I think it is probably not something that we can think of in the short term. But I would also think the more strategic and the more roadmap India builds also to develop manufacturing industry, to leverage local production also for export, the more these questions will also come to mind, because they are a part then of having a suitable large local market, which will then eventually also contribute to being a good base for exportation. So I think short, midterm, I'm not so sure that there will be any movement, and whether it strategically would make sense, I think, and whether the government would pick that up, that is up for discussion. I wouldn't know, but I would certainly hope that if the bigger picture is being looked at, there is a chance to see that the benefits outweigh the disadvantages.
You mentioned the global numbers, which as well have been very strong for Daimler, Martin, and some of the analysts pointed out that there was a concern that these are factors which will fade over the coming quarters. But then equally, they pointed out that while that fear was sizable, it wasn't the only reason that sales were looking up. Do you share the same fears or concerns about India, that this is a temporary phenomenon in terms of a shift or an increased shift towards the luxury market, which will begin to fade over the coming quarters, or you think this one's got some runway going?
Again, I don't think we have a general shift towards luxury vehicles. We have a way to come back in a V-shaped recovery, but I don't see a general shift in that direction. So I don't see a leaning. I would also not see that we see and I said that already, a structural change in the entire passenger car market, at least in our segment. I don't see that there is a real change. It doesn't mean we have, on the midterm, I don't think we will have more individually owned cars versus shared vehicles. I don't think we will have a dampening of the demand for a period which is whenever post-COVID would be. So my belief is we have a temporary setback as an industry, and I would believe we come out of that with India coming back on track in growth. And you see what's happening on the real estate, you see what's happening in consumption. So some indicators are showing into the right direction, and then I'm positive we are there as well. Again, comparing it globally is very difficult, because every market is in a different way, and the countries who have the pandemic situation well under control, they naturally fare better than countries that struggle and have first, second, or I would say the US even have the third wave. That obviously puts a lot of pressure on economy and consumption then. So very difficult to say in an overall picture, but I think our trend shows into the right direction, and I hope we'll see that it continues towards the end of the year.
One final question to you, Martin. As an auto industry leader, now you've ridden through pretty much everything: a downward economic cycle in the country, a global pandemic, and how Mercedes is emerging from there. When you look back, what at this point even frustrates you the most about the Indian landscape, and what do you find most appealing?
Well, dealing with frustrations is an emotion, but it doesn't help you too much. Uh, Obviously, I think we could have stronger customer demand if we had lower taxes, for example. That would definitely help, in my view. But do I call that a frustration? I don't think so. I think we deal with the situation. I mean, I think. What is difficult from time to time is the different regulation in the states. Yeah, so I think a good alignment between center and state functions certainly help. We have seen a lot of that in the early stages of the pandemic, where I found it irritating. I should say, I wouldn't say frustrating, but I can also appreciate that it's a very difficult and unprecedented condition. But generally speaking, I think the smoother that works between center and state, the better is it also for us to do business. The more how I mean, we work in all over India, so it makes sense to have not too many regional differences. Whilst I still understand that there's quite some benefits out of a federal system for doing business, it can be a little bit difficult.
And what appeals to you, or does nothing appeal at this point?
What it appeals to me in terms of business, let me say it like this, it is very easy to do business with partners. It's very easy to connect, and there's a lot of how can I say, entrepreneurial spirit. And that is obviously creating a lot of energy. We have a lot of our dealers are strong partners, and they are, how can I say, entrepreneurs. They know how to do their business. They show a lot of energy and a lot of flexibility. So it's not so much a big corporate environment which is difficult to deal with. And I think in situations like we just had or are in, it helps that this spirit of we can manage it and we'll do it and we think about it helps in my view. So, and that is based on the one hand, this spirit, on the other hand, a strong base of trust and relationship, which I found as a very good underlying foundation for doing business here. So I'm here a little bit over 2 years now, and I can really say I see that as one of the strengths, specifically in crisis times, the good, how can I say, spirit, and then the energy and the relationship to address then trustful the situations at hand, be it good or be it not so good.
It's great to hear that. I wish you all the best, Martin. I hope it's a great Diwali for all of you at Mercedes, and that you beat the record that you set in the last month. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mitali.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.